Okay, good morning, Crusty Crew. My name is Sam. My pronouns are they, them, and welcome back to my office. So, we are starting out my Sapphic fantasy series right now, and I am so excited for it. Now, throughout this series, we're going to be focusing specifically on one Sapphic fantasy at a time. We're going to be doing annotations, we're going to be talking about things in depth. There will always be content warnings, but there will also be like spoiler alert warnings. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers, you don't have to. And we are starting with To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Moniquill Blackgoose. And I am so excited for this. I believe this is a Sapphic fantasy written by an indigenous author. She is Sikonke Wampanoag tribe. And this is supposed to be about dragons and colonizers. It's the first book in a series, so I'm really excited to get started with it, and I hope that I end up liking it. I don't really know much about it other than dragons, Sapphic, and colonizers. So let us pick out our annotation colors, write down what we're going to be annotating, and then we can start reading. Hello, hello. So it is 5:21 p.m. right now, and I just got to page 100 exactly of To Shape a Dragon's Breath. We've already done a little bit of tabbing, a little bit of annotating, but mostly right now we are focusing on world building, which I find to be really detailed and intricate and like quite beautiful. So right now we are following, I believe it's Anakos. I think it's Koos when they explain the pronunciation. We are following her. She is, oh my god, from the Isles. I really want to make sure that I'm pronouncing things correctly because they provided a pronunciation guide, which I genuinely appreciate. So she is from the island of Mosquopog, which is an island that has been like kind of destroyed by settler colonialism by the English people. And this is the story of Anakos, who went to the temple after she saw a dragon to give thanks for the vision, after they had not seen a dragon in their region for over 200 years. And where the dragon was, she found an egg. So she was able to take the egg back to her home, and they showed it lots of respect and beauty and did a lot of rituals and got it used to humans, and then it bonded with her. But her brother, I believe he's working on Vastergot, which is an island or an area run by the English people for the most part. And he comes back to his home village and he's like, well, the English require you to register your dragon, and they will kill your dragon if they decide that you are not up to par with what they want. They will deem your dragon to be feral, if they find the rider to be not up to their standards, not up to what they want, therefore not white. Just saying that. And because of that, and because of an event that happened with her dragon, Casaqua is her dragon's name. Because of that and an incident that happened with Casaqua, she decided to enroll herself in a specific English dragon school, to try and train herself and her dragon. Um, so that's kind of where we're at right now. School is just about to start. Like, she's there like a couple days before school actually starts. So she's just kind of getting used to everything. We got the chance to know her family. We got the chance to know her people and their customs, the sacred nature that they hold towards dragons, the respect and like the concept of the dances that they used to do to like connect with the dragons. No one in the village actually remembers those dances anymore because it's been over 200 years, but they all know of the concept and the respect that should be sent over to dragonkind. And now we're starting to learn like the English and their ways. They're not the vibe. They're really not the vibe. They're just very like stuffy and rude and passive aggressive. All of this sounds a little familiar. So that's where we're at so far. I am loving it. We have had one interaction that starts to indicate that she is interested in women. So we got one sentence of Sapphic desire. And that's all I needed. That held me over. That can hold me over for a little while. We got that on page um 80 86. You know, she walked into the library and it says the last room was empty except for a young woman who was standing beside one shelf, holding an armful of books and putting them away. She was beautiful. Her skin was a dark glowing brown, striking against the starched whiteness of her collar. She wasn't wearing the same kind of uniform that I was. Her dress was gray, and she had a white apron over it. Her mouth was wide, her cheeks high, her chin narrow. She looked at me as I walked over. Her eyes had the subtle angled cleverness of a fox, just higher at the outer corner than the inner. Something in those eyes faded a little, even as I watched, disappointment creeping in. So that's where we're at, and I'm obsessed. It is the next day. I did not give y'all an update for last night because I didn't stop reading until almost 12:30, and I was very sleepy, and I did not want to put on appropriate clothing, so I didn't. And we're doing this today instead. So I got to page 200 of To Shape a Dragon's Breath, and there are some things that I want to talk about. So first of all, we are finally kind of seeing our lineup for the kind of stereotypical like friend group in a YA fantasy, YA dystopian. When I say stereotype, that's not a bad thing. I enjoy the like stereotypical little friend group kind of vibe that YA has going on. It feels like a solid constant that I really enjoy. So we have Anakos, who is our main character. We have her roommate Marta, who at this current moment they're having a hard time because Marta's being an asshole, and she's committing some like hardcore microaggressions and like also just saying like some racist horrible things. But I can kind of see like where some sort of a redemption arc could be, because they had a lot of conversations about how Anakos was like, you're a Dragoneer, you're already outside of like what the expectations for you as a wealthy English woman are. Like, you're already outside of it. You're already not doing what society thinks you're supposed to be doing. And she's like, and Marta's just like, yeah, I know, and I don't think my father would be like upset if I never married, and I really want like a love match, so I don't really want to settle. So then Anakos is just like, then what are you doing? Why are you being like this? Like, why are you being rude to other people, being rude to me, being rude to like the friendships that I am trying to form? Like, why are you being the way that you're being? Why do you value these high society people so much and feel the need to be involved in their society when you're not following what they think that you should be doing? And Marta's just like, ugh, throwing a hissy fit over it. But I can see a redemption arc in a variety there of Marta kind of taking that conversation to heart. We are certainly not at that point yet, and rightfully so, because Marta was being an asshole, but I can kind of envision where this is going. We also have Liberty, who is what I am assuming the Sapphic love interest. She is a 16-year-old black girl who is an indentured servant at the school. Both of her parents died, and she was kind of like tossed over to this one kind of orphanage thing, and then the orphanage like sold her to the school. So now she's like a maid there, but she's an indentured servant. But her and Anakos are getting really close and starting to form a good relationship together. And then we have, his name is Sander. Sander is another friend in the group. He is a hardcore autistic coded first year boy. He is very sweet. He is often nonverbal and uses a wax pad to write. He is the brother to one of Marta's dearest friends, and he has spent his life being called simple when he is definitely not. So we're starting to get to know him, and I really love him as a character. He is fantastic so far. And then our final one, who's like currently being integrated in the friend group, is Theode. Theode is another indigenous character. He was originally from a different island than Anakos, but like the same island that her father is from, or the same community. I'm not entirely sure if it is an island. Actually, I can check the map. So he's from Nakopog. We're going to talk about the map and the accessibility in this book in just a second. But he is also... No. Oh, no. I don't think Liberty is an indentured servant. I think that she is what they call a thrall. I think that I'm a little bit confused on some of the words that they use to like talk about the people who are basically slaves. And I think that's kind of the point of it, like, because it all kind of boils down to pretty much the exact same thing, but they call it a bunch of different things to try and like make it sound okay in English society. But I think Theode is the indentured servant. He is, both of his parents were murdered in a rebellion. He was sent off to be a servant for a family that was giving their children dragon egg. The dragon hatched. It was like, hell no, I don't want these bitches. Ran to Theode, and then he was a dragoneer. It was a whole big scandal. And then the school took over his debts, and now he's an indentured servant there, but also a student. Or maybe he's a thrall. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that this school be buying people. This school be buying brown bodies. That's all I got for you, realistically. But I really love Theode. He was super guarded, and he was such an asshole at first, but it makes sense why. And now he's finally starting to open up and be like, okay, I see where you're coming from with things. Okay, I'm okay with like getting to know you and being like your friend and stuff like that. So we've got like our group, or what I suspect will be our group. There can obviously be changes. I'm only like 40% of the way through. But this is kind of what I'm suspecting that our group is kind of going to look like. Now, we are still in like hardcore world building land. Like we're learning about all of the different subjects right now, and kind of what we're just kind of getting a baseline understanding of the subjects that she is learning. We're also kind of getting a baseline understanding of how the English society is really different, and like what these social and societal expectations are, and how she is not living up to them because no one is like really telling her anything. They're just like putting down the expectation that you should know this tiny little detail, but they spent like they spend so much time being like, do you even know how to read? Do you know how to use a pump and like to get water in the bathroom? And I'm just sitting here and like, okay, so you don't expect her to know how to do basic things that she is showing that she can do. But this tiny little societal detail is what you're expecting her to know? Of course you're setting her up for failures. You're setting her up to like diminish her and like treat her like she is completely less than, while also being like, how could you not know this tiny little detail about speaking to someone? You know, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. But we're still in like a hardcore world building stage, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But now I kind of want to talk about the accessibility of this book. First of all, one of the first things that you see when you open the book is a periodic table of Silpas. So this is like a super complicated subject that they're learning in school, and if she does not pass this, if they do not decide that she is competent at this skill, then they're going to kill her dragon. And then we have the map. The map. Okay, so let's talk about it. I love a good fantasy map. I really do. What I enjoy the most about this map, like this is pretty much an exact replica of our map with just like names and borders and stuff changed. And I love everything about that. I really do, because it makes it more accessible in my brain to understand like locations and things that are going on, and also dynamics, because we're talking about like the main colonizers are the English, and the Angles land is literally where England is. But it just helps like visualize things a little bit better and make it a little bit easier to understand, just because we are being piled on with world building right now, and like a whole system of magic, and it just kind of makes things easier. Like if you're going to pile world building on over here, it makes sense if you have like a better understanding of like chemistry and stuff like that. If you're going to pile it on heavy over here, take off some of the load over here. And also, that makes this so much easier to like connect to real world indigenous experiences, because this right here definitely has like some real world indigenous experiences. Like this, I feel like, is such a good understanding of like showing everyday microaggressions and racist comments and white complacency. Marta is the perfect example of white complacency. She wants to fit in with upper white society so badly, even though she doesn't really fit in with upper white society, but she's willing to throw Anacross to the wolves, basically, to kind of hold her place in upper white society. So, like, this book is just everything. It is everything. I love it so much. I can't believe it's YA. This feels so sophisticated and so beautiful for YA in like the best way. And that's not to shit on YA at all, but like this was not the kind of YA that I was reading when I was a teenager. Let's be honest here, I was reading some things that were not appropriate for teenagers, but I was reading them anyway. But this, like, if I had this kind of YA when I was a teenager, this would have blown my mind. This would have blown me out of the water. I would have been absolutely obsessed with this. I am absolutely obsessed with this. I think that this is the kind of story that teenagers should be reading. This is the kind of YA that should be promoted and tossed out into the world, especially with some complications that we've been having with categorizing YA recently. Especially with like, what wasn't Allie Hazelwood's new book like described as YA, and there were like hardcore sex scenes in it or something, and all of the garbage going on Book Talk. This is a book I would happily hand to a teenager. This is a book that I would hand to a teenager between the ages of 11 and like 17 very comfortably so far. And there are also a lot of conversations going around about how we're kind of skipping over the preteen age, and right now this seems to be a really good book for the preteen age. It's interesting, it's dynamic, it feels like complicated, and feels kind of adult in certain ways, of like they're really not holding back any punches, but it doesn't feel adult in ways that are inappropriate for a younger audience, which I think is kind of where the teenagers of today are kind of hoping to go. They want something that feels adult and topic without all of the traumatizing and sexualizing. You know? You know? So, I've been ranting for 15 minutes now, and I still have 300 more pages to go. So, I guess I'll stop there. And I will check in with everyone later. Okay, hi, hello. So it is Thursday, December 21st. Do I remember the last time I updated this? No, I don't. Let me give you a quick recap though. On Monday, we lost power. Hardcore. We had that big tropical storm in the middle of December in the middle of Maine. Weirdest thing. We have been out of power since Monday at like 1 p.m. and yesterday I found out that my 14-year-old dog, Shady, has a very severe bladder infection. So I finally called it quits and we popped into a hotel. And we are staying at the hotel until the power comes back on. I have no idea when that is because our street got destroyed. Not as bad as other places in Maine because we didn't have flooding. The wind truly wrecked us. But let's talk some more about To Shape a Dragon's Breath. Right now, I am at page 390, and I don't feel like I've done an update within the past like 100 pages, so let's do an update. I feel like I'm still in the world building department at this point, which is not inherently a bad thing. So I believe that this is a duology. I don't believe that this is a series. I think it's a duology, but I might be wrong on that. So there's really a lot of buildup, and I find that a lot of the like stuff going on is like really pushing to show like the relationships and the like way that the characters interact with the world more than anything else. I feel like 390 pages in, we are still just setting the scene, understanding our characters, and like building a relationship with dragons. Do I feel that things are going to pick up soon? I believe that they are. I feel like I'm starting to get like some tension. So the thing that just happened is that her father came to get her because he came back from his whaling trip and he was like, "Where's my daughter?" And he stormed into her school and went and got her, and they did that, and now they are going home for their holiday season back to the island. And at this point, I don't want y'all to think that I'm not enjoying this, because like I'm saying all of these things, like I'm talking about this world building and a lot of this build up and this understanding of the world, and also like the understanding of the perspective of someone who's being affected by colonization but isn't a colonizer. Like that's a really interesting perspective to lay witness to. So like I'm saying these things and I don't want y'all to think that it is boring or uninteresting. I think that this is a story for fantasy lovers. I got the baby. This is a story for fantasy lovers more than anything else. Like at this point, I love the world building. I love the build up. I love the time that we're spending doing this. I think that it's important and valuable and beautiful to read and to lay witness to. But you know, I understand that I understand that some people this wouldn't particularly like be their vibe, but this is my vibe. I love that build up. I love that world building. I love taking the time and the effort to really see and understand like characters and relationships in the world as a whole. And maybe this magic system isn't like the super like most intricate detailed magic system in the world, but I like the ways in which that we are learning about the magic system with our main character. We're like all kind of figuring it out together, which I think is a wonderful thing, and it's something that I don't often feel is done well, but I think that it's done incredibly well in this story, and I believe that is due to not only this author's like really good writing style, but also the time and the effort that they're taking with the story itself. Would some people say that this amount of time world building and like focusing on world building and relationship building is a lot? I think that some people would, but I am someone who really, really loves and appreciates a long fantasy, a long build up, a very intricate understanding of the world around you. I think it's the most valuable when you really get to learn what is going on in a really interesting way with your characters. So honestly, this book is still on track to be a 5-star for me, even though action-wise, not very much has happened. And I'm okay with action-wise not very much happening in the first book of a fantasy series. You know, you gotta give it time, you gotta give it patience, you gotta give it build up. And I really also enjoy some of the romantic tension going on in the story, especially in the way that it is happening. So it's not like super in your face, super like crazy or anything, which I appreciate because this is YA and I think this is an appropriate YA, and I will forever speak on YA and what should be included in terms of like sexualization and like the way that we like will read a YA and it's got like a full-blown sex scene and I'm like, whoa, we need to like take it up like 10 steps back. It's a whole other opinion that I have, but that is besides the point. I think that the romance is done in a very good way for the age group that this is for. You know, this is not, I don't think this is like young YA. I think this is more like the 15, like 14 and up kind of region of YA, and I just think it's fantastic. I'm just kind of loving every second of it, and I feel like I'm savoring it. So not very much has happened action-wise, but we have done so much learning, we have built so many close relationships, and we are finally starting to get tidbits of finding the cultural aspect to dragons again. And they've just made a really awesome revelation that I don't really want to expand on very much. But things are starting to happen, and I am still loving every second of this. I am honestly hoping to finish it today. I've got like 100 and some change pages left. So, let's do some reading.
One eternity later.
Hi! So, it has been like a month since I finished To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Moniquill Blackgoose. Let me just tell you that I did end up loving this. It didn't end up being a 5-star for me, but it ended up being a really strong 4. I would not recommend this book to every person. Definitely not. This is for a person who really loves fantasy. And when I say fantasy, like I mean fantasy. I do not mean romantasy, as some people prefer, which is fine. You can love romantasy all you want. This is not romantasy. You're not going to get what you're looking for out of this. This is a pure, solid, true fantasy. If you are looking for something kind of along the lines of N.K. Jemisin, this is probably going to be more your speed. And when I say N.K. Jemisin, I mean someone who puts a lot of time and effort into world building. Someone who doesn't always have like action going on. Who has like little spurts of action throughout, or spends a lot of time like learning the magic system, like walking through a magic system with you. Take that now, before I start going into the things about this book. Because this book is definitely not for everyone. And I loved this book, and I could see why it was recommended, but if you are someone who was in love with like Fourth Wing and you were looking for another dragon book, this is not in the same realm as Fourth Wing at all. This is way better construction-wise and narrative, and this is a better book in my opinion, but this is not going to give you anything that Fourth Wing gave you. So take that now, because I don't want like the wrong readers to come into this space and shit on this book, because this is a really, really fantastic book and I really loved it, and I'm so excited to continue on with this series. But I understand that it is for a very specific kind of reader. Okay, so from there, we really didn't get like a big action scene with this. This really spent a lot of time setting up, which I think is fine, especially for this kind of fantasy world where you're really coming into this world from the lens of someone being colonized in a very particular way. I think that this was really, really good and interesting to read. This is a very clear, like, direct correlation to, like, the indigenous genocide that happens, continues to happen in North America. So, like, there's a very, very clear direct correlation. The maps are pretty much very similar. Like, everything is very similar. And that's not a critique at all. But you really get to, like, understand from an indigenous person's perspective on, like, what happened. Because we all know what happened, like, we all know the events, but we don't know what it was like for these kids who got, like, taken away from their families to go into, like, society school, and, like, what they had to go through. on figuring out like social etiquette, social norms, like what their expectations were. We don't expect you to be smart enough to read, but we expect you to know this very, very specific way you're supposed to speak to someone, because they are like just a level above. And it's just like that kind of stuff I think was really interesting and impactful to lay witness to from an Indigenous person's perspective. It's not something that I've ever seen done like this before. This is definitely a fantasy book. It's focused on dragons. She is in a dragon school. She is trying to like navigate around the English society to like figure out how she can keep her dragon, because the English treat the dragons like they would like a car. Like, if we don't think that you're good enough to drive it, we're taking it. And in this case, they kill the dragons. So her navigating that and like the understanding of, I have to pass these very specific standards so I can save the life of my dragon and myself, so I can go back to my community and take care of them. Another thing that I find is super interesting about this is that she does not want to be a heroine in any capacity. She spends this entire book with the exact same sentiment of, I want to go home and I want to better my community. I want to be with my family. I want to make us comfortable, and I want to make us the way that we were years ago before dragons were like left or were taken, which I really enjoy, because still at the end, like, that sentiment didn't change. She still wants to go home with her dragon and be with her family and live her life. She does not want to be a heroine. I'm not going to say that's like an endearing trait, but it's a trait that is so much easier to connect with than someone who wants to go out and save the world. It's so much easier to connect with a character that says, I don't want to save the world. I want to save my family. I want to save my community. I want to enhance our relationship in the ways that we had before the English like took everything over and started killing us all. That is so much easier to connect with on a character level, and I think that is so incredibly important. In terms of action in this, I don't really feel like there was a lot of action. There was just a lot of character building and like community building. I really enjoy the way that she ended up like building her own community with Theo and I believe her name was Liberty and Sander. I love the little community that she has created for herself. I love that Sander is just like a sweet, wonderful person that she is friends with. I love that he is kind. I love that he is just trying to live his life, honestly. And she's like, yeah, I vibe with that. I fuck with that. Like, you're one of my people. And I really enjoy that. I really also enjoyed the romance between Liberty and Theo and Anacos. It was just like realistic. Honestly, I think that the explanations of how her like community's romantic relationships work was beautifully done. It was very simple, straightforward, like, this is what it looks like. We've got no problems. We're vibing. And I was like, great, I'm vibing. I like those rules. And her romantic interest in Liberty was really just so natural. It built up so nicely. I mean, there's pining there. There is so much Sapphic pining there, and I love that aspect of it. I love it so much. And what happens with Theo is just something that like kind of builds up so naturally. It is not something that's in your face at first at all. Like, it's very clear with Liberty from the start. With Theo, it's something that really builds up very slowly and kind of becomes something as Theo starts to come into himself more outside of the English society, which I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought it was fantastic. But the best part is that she's still thinking about both of them romantically, and it's not like a love triangle. It's not. It's just, there are these two people. I like them both. We're gonna see where things go. I'm just a teenager. Oh my god. The fact that she's like, yeah, I'm just a teenager. We're just figuring it out is so incredibly important. She doesn't have to pick anyone. She doesn't have to do anything. She's just a teenager. She's just trying to figure her shit out. And I feel like I'm talking mostly about the characters and like their relationships to themselves, the relationship to the world around them. And I'm not saying that the dragons are not an important aspect of it, because they are. The way that she is figuring out how the dragons work in comparison to like her community and her history is so incredibly important and beautiful. And I loved watching that unfold. It is so incredibly impactful. And they've set it up to be like a really interesting continuation point, because she's figured it out, but the English don't know anything yet. And oh boy, is that gonna be like a problem when they know. But just for now, it's just like a beautiful connection to nature and her community and her history and the world around them. And it's just beautiful. This was not a high action fantasy. This was, you're getting your footing. You're touching the ground. You're firmly planted on the ground and ready for takeoff, because things have to happen in the second book. There are so many setups going on that things have to happen in the second book. And I just can't wait to see where it's taken. So take what you will from this. This was a beautiful story about characters, about community, about history, about the connection to the land and the creatures on it. But this was not like high action, high impact. This was a slow exploration of a world and trying to like get through a world that does not want you, but you are yet required to be in. It was just incredibly impactful. I gave it 4 stars. Did I think at some points it was a little bit slow? Yes, but the chapters are so short that it combats that. I think having the really short chapters was a brilliant thing to do writing-wise, like structure-wise. I think that it was the best choice that could have been made, because even though this wasn't a high-action fantasy, it still kind of like rallied you through. It was like, okay, I just started this chapter. Oh my god, this chapter's done. Okay, I just started this chapter. Oh my god, it's done. And you're just kind of flying through it without realizing. If you are someone who really enjoys fantasy, who really enjoys dragons, but not like incredibly high action, like you're willing to put in the time to understand the world and see the complexities of the characters and of the magic system and of the relationship to the earth, this is a really fantastic option for you. If you're someone who's looking for romantasy and like high angst and all of that, this is not for you. This is not high angst at all. This is Annikos saying something and everyone being like, what is wrong with you? And she's just like, but I literally was just straightforward and I just told you exactly what I meant to say. They're like, well, you were supposed to go around in like 10 different circles before you said it. And she's just like, what is going on? So I loved this. 4 stars. I'm so excited for the second book. I think this was done beautifully structurally. I think that some really smart writing choices were made in this book. And I really admire this author. I think that she did a fantastic job in setting us up to continue on with the series and give us a really interesting baseline to go from. There you go. This was To Shape a Dragon's Breath, a YA Sapphic fantasy revolving dragons, genocide, and dealing with being forced into a colonizer's society. There you go. If anyone else has read this, let me know your thoughts about it. I understand that like this is for a very specific reader. Like I really would not recommend this book to everyone. So I'm curious to see what other people have to say about it. And with that, I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day and I will see y'all next time. Bye.